Well, once again, I welcome so many of you to the Perry Stone YouTube channel. I do appreciate the many people around the world, not just in the United States, that are watching in the different age groups. The majority of our people would be over 40 years of age, but we are seeing a lot of younger people and younger couples watching. So we try to present to you a variety of information. Some of it will be prophetic, some of it will be practical, some of it will be very interesting Bible studies and word studies and so on different subjects. But this one is one that I am very interested in because one of my favorite subjects to study is eternity, life after death, and heaven. And we have written, of course, Scenes Beyond the Grave and so many different books on the subject that are very interesting. But I would like to share with you an experience that I had several years ago that has never left me. I've shared it a few times publicly, occasionally, but it is one of those particular stories that most of you watching me right now may have never heard. And I share this with you. It's a true narrative that happened to me personally, but I'm sharing it with you in hopes that it will encourage you, especially if and when you have someone who passes away or is a believer and goes to be with the Lord. The incident that I'm speaking of occurred to me many years ago when I was preaching at Christian Life Fellowship in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The pastor at that time was Dr. Jerry Lilly, a fine minister, man of God, and actually a medical doctor. And my phone just went off, so let me cut that off. So yeah, silent mode on, okay. I don't want ding ding going on while I'm talking. And so what happened was Rusty Domain and myself, a man named Daniel, Dr. Malilly, were going to leave Baton Rouge after service and go fishing right outside of Louisiana. So we drove after service. We stayed at this little hotel. It was really in the early hours of the morning. I think it was probably close to about 12:30 or 1 o'clock. Now that part I don't totally remember, although I totally remember what happened that night. So I was very tired and just almost to the point of exhaustion. We had been preaching a number of days. So I got to the room. It was a room where I had to myself. And when I laid down, I went into this very, very deep sleep. Suddenly, in the middle of the sleep, I found myself standing somewhere in heaven. I didn't see myself go through a gate. I didn't feel myself ascend upward, but it was so real, almost in the form of a vision, that I actually thought something must have happened to me on earth. My memory was that I was lying in bed in this small hotel room, so I didn't remember that, but I said, oh my goodness, I've actually died and I've gone to heaven. I will tell you that a couple things I immediately noticed was the size of it. It was an area that had numerous sections in it. In other words, it didn't have just one look. When you looked around at a 180, it didn't have one look. There was different sections to it as far as the eye could see. Now, I remember, first of all, seeing, and I'm not saying this to be humorous, I just don't know any other way of describing it except trying to give you an image of something you might be familiar with. In the modern movies where they do a Jasper City, like on some other planet, this was a green, almost modern-looking buildings, and they were all kinds of designs, and they were very tall, and it looked like a very, very, almost something in the future type of a modern city that was an almost beautiful, beautiful crystal emerald green color. And that was what was in front of me, and I could see buildings everywhere. They were as far as the eye could see, and I thought, wow, this is like an actual city. Then, as I turned to my right, it changed, and I found myself looking at what appeared to be structures or architectural style buildings that would have been back in the Greek and Roman culture. And I thought, wow, now that's interesting. This one looks like a modern city. This one looks like something that would be, 2,000 years old. And I remember a large coliseum with, it looked like they were white marble columns, just like you would see on Mars Hill in Athens, Greece. And it was a place where thousands and thousands of people were gathering and worshiping the Lord. It was massive. I mean, it was high, tall, long, but I could hear worship coming from there. my impression was that when a person passes away, that they would enter paradise, the soul and spirit leaves the body, and they would enter paradise, and the facilities of whatever the facilities looked like in their day, the finest facilities, not some little thing or poor thing, but the finest buildings and facilities that they would have in their day, they went to a paradise that almost had those same styles of the finest buildings available, and that's where the soul and spirit from that age or that time frame went to. Now, that was the impression I got. So I couldn't understand why does this look modern, why does this look ancient? But it's beautiful, beautiful buildings. I mean, perfection. Suddenly, I saw a man. Now, this is the interesting part. He was a young man, and his name on earth was Claude Whitmire, and he was from Dalton, Georgia. He had been won to the Lord in one of my very early meetings in the early 1990s. I did not know till later he had passed away. So I thought it was odd seeing him in heaven. Now, he wore braces. He wore a back brace all of his life, and he had some physical problems that he had to wear that. He was in heaven moving. He came up to me. I knew who he was, and he's moving and he's jumping. He said, "Look at me. I have no physical problem, Perry, no physical problem." And I was so excited for him, but I was kind of stunned to see him because I did not know he had died a few years before. Hadn't seen him in years. That was interesting. Then I saw beautiful, what we would call flowered boxes made of stone. The flowers, okay, most flowers, like you got a yellow rose, a red rose, you have flowers that basically, most of them are one particular color, a purple, because my wife plants flowers in the backyard, so I know about flowers. She loves flowers. These would have, for example, the color purple, and it would have every shade from light to dark of purple in the flower. I can't even describe what it looked like. It would have red, and some of them were huge. I mean, you talk about like a rose. Our roses are like this. These were massive, but yet they were a variety of different colors. And so this was like really, really fascinating to me about the beauty of the flowers that were there. And the thing about the colors that I do remember was the colors were very vibrant. They were bright. And it almost appeared to me that there were colors that we didn't even really know down here that were mixed together to form just these, but everything was bright. There wasn't anything dark. There wasn't anything, dead looking. And it's almost like the flowers themselves had a life of their own. So I asked Claude Whitmire, excuse me, I said, "Do you know where Tracy Davis is?" Now let me explain who Tracy Davis was. Tracy Davis was my wife's best friend that lived in Birmingham, Alabama. My wife, as many of you know, is from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And Tracy was a friend of my wife and I, even when our son was born, she kept telling Pam, "I'm moving to Cleveland to help be the nanny for Jonathan." She loved little Jonathan when he was just a baby. And I'm telling you, she was, when Pam would get with her, they'd cook together, they'd go out and eat together. It was actually Pam's best friend. Tracy was killed suddenly in an automobile accident. She was in her very early 20s, little Italian girl, and it broke Pam's heart. And for some reason, I have no idea why, I had not thought about Tracy in many years, honestly. I mean, she wasn't on my mind. "Do you know where Tracy Davis is?" He said, "Yes, she's in the children's paradise." And I said, "Wow." So as I take a few steps that quick, not a long walk, I'm suddenly in a children's paradise. Now here's the part of the children's paradise. And when I say children's paradise, this is where children go when they pass away. I noticed that there was these beautiful, but they were tiny. You talk about a tiny home. Now, when I say tiny, not a big house that's small, it was like a playhouse. It was like a playhouse. And these looked like they were all from Romania. I'd been to Romania, and they had the tile on the roof, and it was just a place, and they were on a hill. It was one here, one there. And they had all kinds of things on the inside for kids to enjoy. And I thought, wow. And so it's like if a child passes from Romania, the paradise they go to has buildings that they are familiar with when they were on earth, if they saw those buildings or lived in those buildings, the same styles. Different parts of the world. So there was a part of the world that the buildings would look like buildings in China. They look like buildings in Romania. I thought, this is so wild. I would have never thought about that. I heard singing. And so when I heard singing, I made my way into what was a massive, huge, round theater that was nothing but kids that looked like they were 7, 8, 9 years of age. I'm just telling you, that's how old they all looked. Now, these apparently, in this rather vision I had, were children that had passed away or had died somewhere, different parts of the world. And I walked inside and they were singing this beautiful worship song. They were just all, it would be like a modern children's church. That's the best way for me to describe it. But it was very lovely, very beautiful. And guess who was at the front leading the whole group? Tracy Davis. And she looked just like Tracy on earth. I recognized her. But in these visions, I never went up to her, I never talked to her, and never said, how you doing? I just was amazed to see this. And as I saw her leading this children's ministry, I suddenly came back to myself and woke up in the room. My heart was racing, and I realized that I had not died, but I had an experience. Now, I don't think I came out of the body. That's what Paul talked about when he saw paradise in 2 Corinthians 12. I think it was just a dream vision that God gave me, but it was very real. Colors are very vivid, sounds are very clear, very vivid, etc. Well, when I came back, it would be later that I found out from a friend in Dalton, Georgia, that Claude Whitmore had passed away. Then I had Pam contact Tracy Davis's mother and sister in Alabama and told them about, in fact, I think they came to a meeting in Adamsville, and this is where Pam told them this about the dream I had of Tracy. The sister said to Pam, Pam, you're not going to believe this, but when Tracy was with us on earth, she loved children. She loved being around them and working with them. And if there's anything she would want to do in the heavenly realm, it would be hang with children and be a part of ministering to kids. And I do believe, and I want to give you one more nugget here, that a woman, and I don't want to go into the whole story. Maybe I should leave that alone because it's going to be much longer. But there is a belief that when you leave your body and when you're about to enter paradise, you are asked, how old do you want to look? And most people, that if you've ever seen someone in a vision or dream, or you've had a out-of-the-body experience, life after death experience, your heart quit in the hospital, you saw heaven. And I know people this has happened to legitimately, not weirdos, strange people, but legitimately. They talk about that most of the time their parents or grandparents look like they're 30, 35 years of age. And so I would assume, I asked my wife how old does she want me to look in heaven, and she really did say this. She said, honey, you've looked good your whole life, so it don't matter to me. You talk about making me feel good. I felt really, well, to be honest, it built up my little husband ego a little bit for her to say that. But maybe this is why that children who pass away when they're 8, 9, and 10, 7, 8, 9, and 10, they don't ask to look, for example, 20, 30, or 40, because they never were 20, 30, or 40, so they are about that same age. So it is interesting because this is my personal belief. I do believe that if you lost a child at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age, and you never got to enjoy them at that age, that God allows them to stay or look the age that you remember them when they were on earth. I do believe with infants will mature to a certain level in paradise, and then they are released out of the infant paradise into the children's paradise. And there was a vision a woman had in the 1800s where she saw that, and that's a whole nother teaching. But I do want to encourage you that the way you get to heaven is not just being a good person, not just being a moral person. It's a covenant relationship through Jesus Christ. And so I pray that you will enter that and you will trust Him, you will follow Him. And I want to say one more thing. The older you get, you start realizing mortality is out there, and that you are going to one day, as the Bible said, have an appointment to die, and after that, the judgment. So it's important that you never wait too late or delay in serving the Lord and trusting Him for eternity. Eternity is forever. And Paul said to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And that's a whole nother teaching again. So if you've enjoyed this, if you learned something, if you want to hear more stories like this, give it an instant thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me remind you that we always offer, during different teachings, a special resource product through our ministry that helps keep our manifest telecast, which is very expensive, going around the world, and also keeps our 7-point outreaches up. I appreciate the prayers of so many of you, and you're joining us with this channel. We have people that are of every type of background. We have people that are Muslims, Buddhists, Jews, Hindus that actually keep up with our YouTube channel. So whatever background you're from, whatever nation you're from, please share these with other people and let them know about the exciting teaching in the days ahead. Once again, thank you, and please watch the following. My new book titled The Visions contains specific details of visions and revelations involving future, both national and international events, from visions and encounters that I have recorded in my private journal. I've waited for the right prophetic season to disclose these warnings and events. God's word states that if spiritual watchmen do not warn the people of the danger they see coming, the watchman will be held accountable for what happens to the people. After experiencing much inner conviction in my soul, I sensed it was the right time to pen what I and others have seen. Much of this book covers warning visions explaining what is coming and how to prepare. I've divided the visions into what was, what is, and what is to come. Here are some of the subjects I will cover in the book. Learn the 4 different types of spiritual visions. I explain ancient oracles exposing how leaders attempted to see the future. Visions of cities burning, both present and future, including New York City. My father's vision of a planned East Coast nuclear attack. Also, my recent visions concerning cremation ovens. I experienced a vision of a frightening assault on a public school that I want to share with you. I have for many years experienced tsunami visions, and I've decided to release that information and include the locations that I have seen in those visions. There is a vision of a nuclear power plant that initiates a stock market crash. There's a vision of empty cities and empty streets that I believe is linked to the recent pandemic and possibly another pandemic coming. The vision of the 10-mile radius bioweapons attack on London, England. And also, I've seen in 3 different visions a strong earthquake impacting the Midwest, especially the St. Louis area. I also talk about the strange vision of 3 tornadoes that I believe cost Hillary Clinton her political future. I share a vision revealing future attacks on individual Christians and churches. I also talk about when political leaders and their administrations lose divine favor with God. I have a section where I talk about 2024 and beyond, and I've included what I believe to be an interesting historical parallel about a possible Trump second term. The coming revival through the lens of a camera. One of my favorite chapters that's going to be very helpful to you is this: 10 rules and wisdom principles for surviving and thriving at the end. The book also has important instructions for the reader to follow. When you order this new book, I'm also including my 2 audio CD teaching, The Battle of the Two Marks, which exposes the future mark of the beast and explains the mystery of the seal of God, both which are alluded to in the book of Revelation. Get the new book and the audio CD now for your donation of $35 or more. Ask for offer VS 141. You can order at perrystone.org or by calling toll-free 1-888-21-BREAD or mail your order to Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. I hope every prophetic student, intercessor, and those interested to know what is ahead will take time to order this new spiritual resource. I've written this in the fear of the Lord, but I believe it's now the time to release the messages. A remnant is now waking up and preparing. What about you?
If you enjoyed this YouTube content, there's an important website you should know about: perrystone.org. Perrystone.org is an essential resource for the latest books, audiovisual presentations, and digital products from Perry Stone Ministries. Resources that cover the same kinds of topics discussed in the program you just watched. Stop in and see all that's available at perrystone.org.